Hey guys, Spence here, and this is...
Senran Kagura Shinovi vs 少女たちの証明
So, Senran Kagura. This was originally a manga series back in 2011 that eventually spun out to its own anime and video game series, being developed by Tabsoft and being published by its parent company, Marvolous, and our localizing friends back at XSeed. Now, a rough overview of the series is basically it follows different groups of ninja girls going through ninja school who have to fight one another due to varying circumstances, and also they fight each other to the point that their clothes fall off. Well, are destroyed, better said, but yeah, let's set the tone right now. Now, up until this point, the game series has mostly been on the PlayStation platform and handhelds, but this is their first game on the PC, though this game in particular was released back in 2013 on the PlayStation Vita in Japan, and the Americas in 2014. So, promising to be 60 frames and not to be a bad port, what exactly is going on with Senran Kagura Shinobi Versus? The plot of Shinobi Versus is alright. It takes time when you first start a file to actually explain the world how ninjas existed long ago in the past and continue on into the modern day, and how ninja are separated into two real groups. The good ninja who work for the government and evil ninja who work for the highest bidder. Now, the plot follows the different girls from the different ninja schools depending on which school you decide to choose for the campaign, with there being 3 in total and a 4th one unlocking after you beat the other 3, unless you're like me and put in a cheat code. And each one tells a different version of the story with very different outcomes. Now, there's 2 real things I want to say about the plot. First off, the characters tend to be really one-note. Almost all of them have one personality trait about them that is really accentuated to an extreme. Like characters that are really obsessed with another character, characters that are obsessed with boobs, characters that are obsessed with being a masochist. While these personality quirks are often used for the jokes, a lot of the time they just makes them really predictable in regards to how characters react to things. They do reveal other aspects about them, like motivations and why they have the personality traits that they have, but a lot of the time these things come off incredibly secondary compared to their main trait. My second point, very early on the game says that the world of Shinobi is full of beauty and death, and you replace beauty with happy-go-lucky, sometimes pervy time, and death with super serious, sometimes death might get involved sort of time, then yes, that would be 100% accurate, as the game likes to bounce between these two themes a lot more than you would think. A good example of this that I could think of is a time where character A and character B are gonna get into a life or death duel, but character B decides to grope character A because that's their personality quirk. Yeah, Senran Kagura is kinda all over the place when it comes to which one it bounces to. And for the most part, the plot is okay. If you're really into it, I guess you'll like it, but for the most part, it's okay in my book. Leaning towards the predictable sort of side. Gameplay-wise, if you play one of the Dynasty Warrior games or Musou spin-offs, then you're gonna get familiar with these controls pretty darn quick. Assuming you're using a controller, of course. You have weak attack combos, and then your strong attack that you can put into your weak attack combos to do special attacks, though in this case there are way less combinations and they're way less useful as opposed to normal Musou games. Then you can dash, and if you're not going to put it into the air, you can dash after them to do an air combo, you can block, and then if you're timed to block properly, you can do a parry, which will cause the enemy to be stunned, and to refill some of your ninja scrolls, which you use for your special ninja attacks, and also to transform, leading me to one of the main mechanics of the game. You see, every single character has 3 basic modes. The first mode, called Flash, is basically their weakest, with its main benefit being providing characters with extra EXP. Then by using one of your scrolls, which you get by attacking things and finding them on the ground, you can transform into your second form, referred to as Yang. With the transformation sequence, you get your HP refilled, extra attack, extra defense, new basic attacks, and the ability to use ninja arts, which are basically big, stompy, wide-sweeping attacks that also consumes ninja scrolls. And lastly, there's Yin mode, also referred to as panic mode, where basically your character's clothes will burst off, but the trade-off is they'll gain access to new attacks that will enable them to combo enemies indefinitely, though they will have lower defense. Speaking of the damage of apparel, as you take damage, your apparel, it starts to go. It stops at the unmentionables, but if you use a ninja art attack when they are in them, then it's like that. And no, there's no obvious in-game benefit. In the single player, there's only really the story mode and the Shinobi Heart mode, which acts more or less as an arcade mode. In the story mode, you'll go through stages with story bits going on in between. Meanwhile, in the Shinobi Heart mode, it's just a set chain of stages, with each individual character having their own set. As far as the gameplay goes, it's a pretty shallow action game. Even with the different modes and the different attacks you get, you don't have that many combos, and the effectiveness of the yin and yang are pretty interchangeable. Yeah, you can level them up through usage and they'll be better, but decay still remains. Also, the actual stages themselves, after you play a few, you kinda seen it all. You either fight through an army of Shinobi to fight the boss at the end, which is always a playable character, or you fight the boss immediately when the stage starts. Admittedly, the story mode changes up a bit by making you fight more than one sometimes, but for the most part, it's pretty boilerplate how you go about the stages. Then the levels of the characters can be kinda janky if you're like me and bounce between the Shinobi Heart mode and the story mode, making characters that went through the Shinobi Heart mode have a way easier time because they got a bunch of levels in the Shinobi Heart mode beforehand. Basically making it that you have to turn up the difficulty for them while everyone else has to deal with the normal difficulty. Which can be annoying if stages are immediately followed by other stages without you being able to change the difficulty at all, making you have to quit out and then change the difficulty through the menu again. Speaking of traversing through the menus, there's a lot of loading in this game. Not exactly in the longest sense, but in the almost every time you bounce through a different menu, you have to load something. Remember, this was a Vita game. Now you might have heard me say the phrase single player, and yes, there is multiplayer, and yes, it is online, and no, my time with it wasn't exactly the best. When I tried to, the game could not connect me to anyone else for some reason. I tried to matchmake, and that didn't work. I tried to connect to other rooms, and that didn't work. But the second I made a room, other people could join me for some reason. Granted, the one person who was playing and looking for a room at the time. Now, pretending that the connection issues weren't a thing, the modes I really had a problem with. In the first mode, you got points for beating up the enemy peons that spawned in, and could steal the points from other players if you defeated them. And the second mode was the closest thing to a deathmatch, where basically you got points by stripping your opponent, so basically hitting him. So yeah, it's the closest thing you get to a deathmatch, but guess what? Peons are still spawning in for some reason. And in the last mode, you have to collect panties that are raining from the sky. And yes, peons are still spawning in. Yes, you can steal them from your opponents. And no, I'm not making that last mode up. I didn't find any of these modes particularly enjoyable, but once again, it was kinda hard to make a room when there's not many people playing. Sure, you can put in AI opponents, but those aren't human, so you're not gonna get a whole lot of challenge out of them, even if you set them to the highest difficulty. Also, any empty slots will be filled up by AI opponents, at their lowest difficulty, and you can't even choose which character they are. I don't understand why that aspect of the game can't be controlled by the player at all. The gameplay as a whole, I would be lying if I said I didn't have fun with it, but this is a game best enjoyed in bursts as opposed to longer sessions. Namely because of the game's shallowness and its difficulty can just sort of go everywhere if you just bounce between the two modes. And the load times can be pretty darn annoying, especially in story mode where there's a lot of talking going on, because surprise surprise, anytime there's a transition, there is a loading screen associated. Presentation wise, they were not lying, it does run at 60 and has a good amount of resolutions, though after that, that's all there is when it comes to options. Which is kind of annoying because another thing about gameplay is that all those cutscenes about when clothes break or doing special attacks, while those can be skipped, they cannot be turned off. Though in multiplayer, they don't actually show those animations, so I don't know why it's not an option in the game. Sound-wise, the sound effects are okay, and the music, it's alright. There are some tracks that sound better than others, but it's really a big case of certain parts of them sound cool, the rest of them is kind of forgettable. When it comes to the game's actual visual style, yeah, it's basic modern Japan with anime characters with a semi-shell-shaded look to them. And when it comes to that fan service, yes, they lean into it. And I mean they lean into it. You can harass your characters in the dressing room, you can strip your opponents, they give you a butt shot when you're explaining the setting to you in the beginning of the Hanzo story. The shot keeps assets jiggle, why even? So yeah, while the presentation is definitely up for interpretation, I'll say it's okay. Like a lot of the game. And that's Senran Kagura Shinovi Versus. Would I recommend this game? Only if you like, expect, or tolerate these 4 points. If you like Musou games, because this is a Musou game through and through, and if you didn't like Musou games before, this will not change your opinion. 2, the anime style and sensibilities. If those things do not appeal to you at all, then I don't know how you got this far in the video. 3, the excessive amount of fan service. I assure you, it cannot and will not be turned off, so if it makes you uncomfortable, yeah, it's not going anywhere. And lastly, if you would accept an average game. It's really a death by 1,000 cuts because these problems just add up over time, and it doesn't make sense why half of them are even here. Like, why are there only a few difficulty options? Like, you can't even change the difficulty of the Shinobi Heart mode. Then there's the fact that characters can literally out-level the game. There's the load times that can get kinda silly with some of the longer interactions. And while there is character variety, there isn't a whole lot of game variety. And in conclusion, makes for an average action game that's best enjoyed in bursts. It can be mindless fun, and in its defense, it's a way better price point than Samurai Warriors 4 2, but it's not going to be a premium experience by any means. And ironically, you and the characters in the game will quickly outgrow any of the challenges that the game has to throw at you before long.
まあざっとこんなもんかな。
Hello again, thanks for watching. If you happen to like this sort of content, drop a like, comment, subscribe, and maybe tell a friend who will also be interested in this sort of content. In the meantime, you can click on the left annotation and see the last video I did, talking about Overwatch, because that is a really fun game. Don't 100% back the loot boxes, but it's still a really fun game. On the other hand, you can click the right annotation and hear more about Samurai Warriors 4 2 and my opinions on that. Also, if you just want a more refined action game, check out Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, also on the channel.